Hello there. Welcome to our video about one of the most infamous figures in the Warhammer 40k universe, Angron. Angron is one of the Primarchs, genetically engineered superhumans created by the Emperor of Mankind to lead his Space Marine legions. However, unlike some of his brethren, Angron's story is one of tragedy and rage. He was raised as a gladiator on the harsh world of Nuceria, where he was forced to fight and kill for sport. Eventually, he was discovered and taken by the Emperor to become a leader of his forces. But the bitterness and anger from his past never left him, leading to a life of violence and bloodshed. In this video, we'll dive deep into the story of Angron and explore his impact on the Warhammer 40k universe. We'll also take a look at the influence of chaos on his life and the legacy he left behind. So buckle up and get ready to learn about one of the most fascinating characters in the Warhammer 40k universe, Angron, the Red Angel. Angron's childhood was filled with sorrow and misery. He was born on the planet Nuceria and was seized as a slave by the world's rulers and forced to compete in gladiatorial games. These games were cruel and lethal, and only the most powerful and vicious combatants survived. Angron swiftly rose to prominence, winning fight after fight and earning a reputation as a fearsome warrior. His prosperity, however, did not bring him contentment. Angron was gripped by a raging wrath that would not leave him. He was continually at conflict with the people who enslaved him, and he grew increasingly angry at them. Enslaved by the Lords of Deshier, Angron was brutally implanted with the Butcher's Nails, a cybernetic device that increased his anger and pain tolerance. The procedure was agonizingly painful, and they had to knock him out to do so. When he awoke, in a fit of blind rage, he killed his adoptive father, and his only real connection to any form of humanity was severed then and there. The nails would become a defining aspect of Angron's life, as they magnified his already intense rage and violence. The Butcher's Nails had a major effect on the World Eaters as well, who were notorious for their harsh tactics and willingness to die in combat. Angron's violent disposition distinguished his leadership, and he frequently led his warriors into combat personally, loving the opportunity to spill blood and cause devastation. The nails, on the other hand, took a toll on Angron's physical and mental health, and he was frequently overwhelmed by bouts of anguish and wrath. Angron's childhood on Nuceria, along with the implantation of the Butcher's Nails, would influence his whole life and legacy, propelling him to become one of the most feared and terrifying individuals in the Warhammer 40k universe. Angron, despite his reputation as a fearsome gladiator, finally revolted against his Nucerian enslavers, launching a slave insurrection that concluded with his rescue by the Emperor of Mankind. Angron, on the other hand, saw his rescue as a betrayal of his fellow slaves. He rejected the Emperor's attempts to pull him into the Imperium's fold, and was finally dispatched to head his own legion of Space Marines, the World Eaters. The World Eaters were constructed from the shattered remains of numerous earlier legions, and Angron was chosen to head them because of his remarkable combat abilities and willingness to take risks. His leadership approach, on the other hand, was far from traditional. He rejected strategy and tactics in favor of charging recklessly into battle and letting his legion's berserker wrath handle the rest. This made the World Eaters a powerful fighting force, but it also resulted in a significant number of violence and losses. Despite their failings, the World Eaters remained steadfastly devoted to Angron, viewing him as a father figure and source of inspiration. They were prepared to follow him to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, even if it meant sacrificing their own lives in the process. He abandoned strategy and tactics in favor of going into battle recklessly and letting his legion's berserker anger do the rest. This made the World Eaters a formidable combat force, but it also resulted in enormous bloodshed and casualties. Despite their flaws, the World Eaters remained committed to Angron, who they saw as a father figure and source of inspiration. They were willing to follow him to the farthest corners of the cosmos, even if it meant risking their own lives. The World Eaters were nearly annihilated in the end, and Angron was forced to travel the cosmos alone, driven by hatred and bitterness. Angron's destructive journey continued into the Horus Heresy, when he played a key part in the dropsite slaughter on Isstvan III. Horus had declared war on the Imperium at the moment, and the traitor legions had united together to mount a huge onslaught on the loyalist Space Marines. Angron took his legion to the planet, where it allied with the other traitor armies. The traitors' overwhelming numbers and ferocity absolutely took the Loyalist forces by surprise, headed by the Iron Hands and Salamanders. Angron's hunger for murder and devastation had no boundaries as the conflict went on. He led his soldiers into battle, cutting through the Loyalist ranks with merciless efficiency. He fought in conflict with many Loyalist Space Marines, all of whom were defeated by his uncontrolled wrath and might. The drop site slaughter was a complete triumph for the traitors, with significant losses for the Loyalist soldiers. Angron relished in the slaughter and devastation, but triumph did not come cheap. The conflict resulted in even higher casualties for the World Eaters, who had already been ravaged by the implantation of the Butcher's nails. The Legion was torn, and many of its members were gone for good. Angron was injured throughout the combat, yet he refused medical care or repose. He led his legion into war again and again, determined to destroy the Imperium and claim triumph for himself and his fellow traitors. Angron's participation in the Dropsite massacre reinforced his image as a merciless and ruthless destroyer. His preoccupation with murder and slaughter would eventually bring him down, but his legend as a terrifying warrior and a force to be reckoned with would carry on for generations. Angron was abandoned to travel the galaxy until he met Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers, who saw the potential in Angron's rage and invited him to crusade with him. Angron headed the Shadow Crusade, a crusade to destroy the Imperium's worlds and bring them into the fold of chaos, with the Word-Bearers. Angron led his World Eaters into battle throughout this war, and their savagery and bloodlust became a terrifying sight for the Imperium's defenders. The Shadow Crusade eventually came to a conclusion, and the World Eaters were tasked with capturing Armatura. Nevertheless, the Butcher's nails malfunctioned during the combat, sending the World Eaters into a frenzy. Lorgar carried out his wicked plan to save his brother from the Butcher's nails, as the Ruin Storm was called forth, ripping the sky apart and unleashing a crimson torrent forged from the spirits of 100 dead worlds, pouring blood over the battlefield. Lorgar concentrated his attention on his mutilated brother's victorious appearance, calling for the Neverborn, the beings mankind incorrectly referred to as demons, to respond in kind. He ignited the synapses in his brain, overloading them as his brother lay dying in agony, but finally going to be released from his suffrage. His body began to tear itself apart, swelling and rising. After a lifetime of shattered torment, perfecting Angron's apotheosis into demonhood occurred at this point. In an attempt to thwart the Urizen's nefarious designs, the 12th Legion's remaining librarians used their collective psychic talents to materialize the Communion, the Gestalt awareness of brilliant psychic mental might. During Lorgar's incantations, the Communion extracted the Primarch's soul from his body. Within the warp, the two mental creatures met one another, locked in a deadly battle of wills, each certain that they were the one responsible for preserving Angron. Yet the Communion finally failed because Lorgar was just as strong in the warp as he was in the physical reality. Angron's transformation into a demon prince was complete when he turned his attention to the librarians. The surviving librarians were slaughtered by the demon Primarch's anger, each of them suffering a distinct fate. Angron had finally rid his legion of the weakness that had afflicted his gene sons since his reunion with them when he slaughtered the last of the World Eater's librarians. Angron's personality. Angron's metamorphosis into a demon prince resulted in the birth of a new creature in the cosmos, the Red Angel. He was now a creature of enormous strength, and his very presence on the battlefield could make even the most valiant soldiers fearful. The Red Angel's wrath was a force to be reckoned with, and few could withstand it. Angron was no longer constrained by the limits of mortal flesh as a demon prince. He could now express his hatred and anger in hitherto inconceivable ways. His sheer presence on the battlefield was enough to drive his opponents fleeing, and his fighting intensity was unrivaled. The Red Angel was a truly destructive force, and he reveled in the carnage he wrought. Angron, despite his newfound strength, remained a troubled soul. The Butcher's nails had taken their toll on his psyche, and the ghosts of his past haunted him. He was still possessed by fury and resentment, and his hatred for the Imperium remained as strong as ever. In many respects, Angron's metamorphosis into a demon prince simply added to his agony. Even among the Chaos Gods, he was now an outcast, and his mere presence was a reminder of his failure to topple the Emperor. The Red Angel was a terrifying apparition, but he was also a sorrowful character, destined to remain in a state of constant rage and misery. Angron's metamorphosis into a demon prince signified a profound shift in his nature, unleashing the Red Angel's full wrath on the cosmos. Angron's contempt for weakness has been a distinguishing feature of his personality since his days as a gladiator on Nusaria. To him, the only virtue that matters is strength, and those who can't keep up with his standards aren't worth his time. This disdain for whatever he considers lesser has spilled over into his duty as a demon prince, and he has been known to harshly punish any who fail him. Angron's hatred to weakness has led him to embrace a destruction philosophy, thinking that the only way to construct something stronger is to first destroy what is currently there. During his lengthy and violent history, he has demonstrated this time and time again, even going so far as to destroy whole worlds to make his point. To him, the weak deserve nothing but death, and it is his job to provide it. This contempt for frailty extends to his own body and psyche. He sees pain as a necessary cost for strength and frequently criticizes himself for any and all perceived weakness or failure. Angron's disdain for vulnerability has also made it difficult for him to develop lasting connections. Most other beings are beneath him, undeserving of his attention or regard, in his opinion. His fellow Chaos Space Marines are not immune to his contempt, as he sees them as nothing more than instruments to be utilized for his own ends. Angron's contempt for weakness is ingrained in his personality and has guided much of his behavior throughout his long and violent existence. Strength is the only attribute that counts to him, and anything less is worthy of destruction. While this mentality has made him a formidable opponent, it has also alienated him from others, making it impossible for him to make meaningful ties with anybody. Angron was known for his ruthlessness and love of war, but he also had a passionate commitment to his fellow World Eaters that was frequently underestimated. Angron loved passionately for those who battled beside him, despite his contempt for weakness and those who could not fight for themselves. Angron commanded the World Eaters in multiple engagements against the Imperium during the Horus Heresy, exhibiting his unrivaled fighting prowess and ruthless disposition. His ex, however, demonstrated his affection for his fellow World Eaters. But, as Angron's transition into a demon prince progressed, his affection for his fellow World Eaters took on a darker hue. He grew more demanding and domineering, insisting that his troops battle exclusively for him and his honor. He came to see them as extensions of himself rather than as distinct persons with their own ideas and ambitions. This eventually caused a schism among the World Eaters, with some of the more independent-minded members questioning Angron's leadership and his increasingly erratic conduct. The Legion was split into two factions, those who were strongly devoted to Angron and others who desired to break away and pursue their own path. Despite this, Angron's affection for his fellow World Eaters never faded. Even in his craziness, he continued to battle for their honor and the Legion's overall greatness. His legacy as the Red Angel and loyalty to the World Eaters will be regarded as one of the most passionate and terrible storylines in the Warhammer 40k universe's history. Angron in Arcs of Omen. The impact of Angron in the most current Arcs of Omen books cannot be overstated. He is an important character in the plot, and his presence is felt throughout. The novel is set in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, and Angron is still coming to terms with the events that led to his transformation into a demon prince. Angron is portrayed as a multifaceted and troubled character in the novel. On the one hand, his hate for the Imperium and desire for vengeance continue to consume him. He is prepared to go to any length to attain his objectives, no matter how harsh or cruel. At the same time, he is revealed to have a gentler side, particularly when it comes to his fellow World Eaters. The relationship between Angron and his followers is a major element in the story. Despite his change, Angron is still regarded by the World Eaters as a father figure. People look up to him and admire him, despite their fear of him. Angron, on the other hand, is intensely protective of his troops and would go to any length to keep them safe. Angron's influence is felt in a variety of ways throughout the narrative. In the battlefield, he is a force to be reckoned with, and his hatred and fury are legendary. His presence has an emotional influence on all around him, both friends and foes. The mere sight of him frequently sends soldiers running in panic. Maybe most significantly, Angron's influence is felt on a personal level. He is a character that has experienced a significant degree of grief and suffering, and his interactions with others reflect this. He is deeply devoted to his friends and supporters, yet he is also easily angered and violent. Despite this, there is a sense that Angron is still looking for something more, something to give his life significance outside of the never-ending cycle of conflict and carnage. Angron's influence in the most current arcs of Omen book is apparent. He is a fascinating and complicated figure whose challenges and successes will be remembered by readers for many years to come. This work is highly worth reading whether you are a fan of the Warhammer 40,000 universe or simply like a good narrative. The World Eaters and the Butcher's Nails. The Butcher's Nails were a significant factor in shaping the World Eaters into the brutal, berserker legion they were known for. Implanted into the brains of the legionnaires, the nails caused extreme pain and pleasure responses, amplifying their aggression and battle lust to a dangerous degree. While Angron was not directly responsible for the creation of the nails, he was the first to have them implanted and became a strong advocate for their use. He believed that the nails helped his fellow World Eaters reach their full potential in combat and saw them as a way to overcome the pain of his own upbringing. The nails, on the other hand, had unforeseen repercussions. They enhanced the World Eaters' negative emotions, such as rage, hatred, and violence, while decreasing their capacity for empathy and compassion. This resulted in a warrior civilization that only recognized violence as a way of communication and struggled to find another outlet for their wrath. The World Eaters were unable to control their war urges, becoming chaotic and unpredictable. The nails warped their minds and rendered them unable of distinguishing between friend and foe, resulting in the murder of numerous comrades and innocents. The nails had such an impact that even after Angron and the World Eaters were defeated, the remains of the Legion continued to implant them in fresh recruits. The entire scope of the nails' deleterious consequences did not become evident until the events of the Horus Heresy, and the practice was finally abandoned. The Butcher's Nails were critical in establishing the World Eaters as a merciless and brutal army. Unfortunately, their influence contributed to the Legion's demise and the loss of numerous lives. Angron's faith in the nails as a method of conquering suffering and gaining more power was ultimately mistaken, and the nails' legacy will be one of agony, suffering, and death. Angron's leadership of the World Eaters. The World Eaters were greatly influenced by Angron's leadership. He was a ruthless and unyielding commander who believed in the importance of force and the power of violence. The World Eaters were a powerful battle force under his command, feared throughout the galaxy for their fury and savagery. Angron's leadership, on the other hand, was characterized by a strong sense of betrayal and animosity against the Imperium. He considered the Emperor as a dictator who had subjected him to enslavement and torture. The World Eaters' battle cry of "Blood for the Blood God," a testament to their dedication to chaos and devastation, expressed this sense of rage and hatred. Despite this, Angron was devoted to his fellow World Eaters. He fought beside them on several battlefields and was always eager to lead them into battle. Angron's leadership style was defined by a single-minded emphasis on success at whatever cost. He felt that the only way to win was by using brute force, and that any other technique was a show of weakness. As the World Eaters pushed recklessly into battle, without regard for tactics or strategy, this approach contributed to a series of calamitous defeats. Angron's leadership, on the other hand, was distinguished by a keen grasp of his fighters' requirements. He understood how to encourage them, excite them, and push them to their limits. Finally, Angron's leadership had both beneficial and harmful effects on the World Eaters. Despite his weaknesses and failings, Angron remained a figure of veneration and devotion to his World Eaters' followers. Angron was a hands-on and direct commander who led from the front lines, rather than a remote and aloof commander who commanded from afar. He battled with his men, felt their anguish and weariness, and shared their triumphs and failures. He was never one to back down from a fight, and he constantly pushed his soldiers to be their best. Angron's treatment of his troops mirrored this mindset. Angron's legacy. Despite his defeat during the Horus Heresy and the near demise of his legion, Angron's influence on the Warhammer 40k universe lives on. Angron has appeared in a variety of Warhammer 40k media, including books, comics, and video games. In these appearances, he is frequently shown as a powerful and terrible character who inspires both awe and horror in his opponents. His character is still a popular favorite, and his narrative is frequently retold and expanded upon in new media. Additionally, Angron's contribution to the Warhammer 40k universe's narrative cannot be overstated. His tale has had an impact on the growth of other characters and groups, as well as the game's overarching plot. Thank you for watching. Check out our Patreon for more amazing artwork, and comment on what you would like to see next.